Today we're going to be talking mainly about, in this section, the Red Sea crossing. You have a video you'd like to share with us, and you're going to tell us what's going on there.
Yes. Before we start the video, we have a map here of the Sinai Peninsula,
Okay.
where the children of Israel, they left Egypt proper, which will be over in the Cairo area, for instance, and they traveled east across the Sinai, and then they were told to turn south, which that brought them down through the Wadi Watur, through the mountains, and then the Wadi Watur emptied out onto this large beach that we see on the east side of the Sinai Peninsula, and the western edge of the Gulf of Aqaba.
And that is Nueva.
That's Nueva, and that's where we're headed to. That's the Red Sea crossing site. Here, we're starting out in Cairo, and we're driving through the city here. You can see it's quite large. You see the minarets and so forth in the background.
So you're literally going to take us to Sinai in your car?
Yes.
All right, this is great.
This is the route. We're going to actually travel almost the route that the children of Israel took, crossing the Sinai and going over to the Red Sea crossing. Here in the background, you can see a large ancient castle there in Cairo. Of course, they have a lot of history compared to the United States.
Yes, hundreds and hundreds of, if not thousands, obviously thousands of years there.
And so there's a mosque that we're driving by. Our taxi's taking us to our hotel at this point. But again, more of this large ancient castle there. And so the next morning from atop our hotel, we're looking down on the streets there in Cairo. From here, we're going to look south, and in the distance, as we zoom in, we can see the pyramids at Giza, the Great Pyramid, and so forth. Right here next to the city, it's quite amazing that you could see the pyramids right next to the city from a distance.
That is quite a sight.
Yeah. So in our graphic again here, the map, we're going to go across the Sinai, and we're going to turn south and go through the mountains to the Red Sea crossing site. That's our destination. But Solomon's seaport was on the northern tip of the Gulf of Aqaba at Eilat, according to 1 Kings 9:26, and it termed this body of water as Yam Suf, or the Red Sea. That is the body of water we're heading over to, the Gulf of Aqaba. And as we're heading east out of Cairo, we're taking our taxi, and we encounter the Suez Canal that we've all heard of. And along the way here, we have to go underneath the Suez Canal. There's a tunnel going underneath the Suez. It's over a mile in length.
That's one way of going through the waters on dry ground, I suppose.
Yes. So our driver's taking us through the tunnel here, and we've got an abbreviated video segment of it as we enter. And it's a quite nice, but it is a small, 2-lane tunnel. But then we come out the other side after driving over a mile, and we have just left Africa, and we're now in Asia. And we're going to go across the Sinai Peninsula, similar to the route that the children of Israel took. And
albeit not on asphalt.
Yes, right. Along the way, we saw this truck in front of us that said, "I love Jesus." Of course, we're in a Muslim country, but we thought that was interesting.
That's very gutsy in a Muslim country.
Right. And so we went through some checkpoints on the way, going through.
Were you ever questioned about your video along the way by those in the checkpoints?
Well, usually our driver would tell us to put the cameras down.
Probably a wise choice.
Yeah, right. We don't want to be hauled off to jail.
No.
So along the way, you see all the flat terrain. This would enable them to travel more quickly across the Sinai. They want to get out of Dodge as fast as possible. And
3 million people in tow, if not more.
Yes. So again, we're taking video, different segments along the way. Again, you see the flat terrain as we're heading further east. And again, this may be an area where we kind of headed south. And again, you see a really flat area where the children of Israel would have journeyed through here.
They would have never suspected that they would be entangled in the desert, as the word says, encountering a Wadi Watir after seeing this.
I'm sure a lot of the men that knew the area, when they turned south, they became concerned, where is Moses taking us?
Right.
But
well, as Michael Rood points out in his video, Nueva, in the beach, you're pretty much cornered. You've got
yes,
wilderness to one direction and armies to the other.
yes, right, right. And so in this area, we're getting closer to the Wadi Watur that goes through the mountains. Again, the flat, nice terrain. And here's the beginning of the Wadi Watur. It's a wider area, but you see the mountains on the right and the left. And plenty of room through here. It's a nice, generous, wide area.
You almost wonder if they thought, great, we're going to be hidden in here, and that's going to be a good thing.
Yes.
But was not
But
the case.
they found out later, yeah, they came to a stop. So here's the wadi we're going to travel through to get to the large beach there. And this is where it will exit later. This is from Google Earth.
Can you imagine getting millions of people through there? That would have been a feat in
It
itself.
became tight at some point, but in the distance we see the mountain we'll head to later in our next segment, Mount Sinai over in Saudi Arabia. But you can see the orientation of the crossing site to the Mount Sinai in this graphic here. So here we are, we're going through the Wadi Watur. We see the mountains. This is a nice wide area that we stopped.
And it's still fairly passable here.
Yes.
Does not look like a threat at all.
Right. But as it gets narrow, we can see here it's much narrower. And things were a bit congested.
And there is nothing there. I mean, no wonder they were concerned. There's no food, there's no water.
Yes.
Just a bunch of rock. And
Right.
so...
And you can't take your wagons over top of these mountains here.
No.
Look how steep this is.
We have to remember, there's no asphalt in that day. I mean, there's no smooth road. They're feeling every bump. They're
Yes.
likely twisting ankles trying to get away
Yeah,
so fast.
Exactly. And so, winding our way through this narrow area, it gets more and more narrow. Here we make a turn through a narrow spot. And I think we may pan up at some point, and you can see how steep these large mountains are. So it says in Exodus 14, they're entangled in the land, the wilderness hath shut them in. So Exodus is telling us they're going through the Wadi Watur, they feel all shut in, they're entangled, they're winding their way through these narrow mountains. And
Yeah, for those who argue a different crossing point, that verse would not make sense.
Right.
Where are they going to
Right.
be literally entangled?
yes, and you can see how steep it is, very steep there. We shot up there. And again, very narrow. You're not going to go over top of these mountains. But Josephus said, for there was on each side a ridge of mountains that terminated at the sea, which were impassable by reason of their roughness and obstructed their flight. So again, he is agreeing with what the Bible is saying about the mountains.
And even with more detail that would further
that
prove.
it's terminating at the sea. And here we're getting closer to the exit point, closer to the beach where they'll come to a stop. In the distance are the end of the mountains. And this is the end of the Wadi Watur. You can see here where it's washed out recently.
Now, had you wondered as you were approaching this, where did that fire come down and separate the Egyptians from the
We will
Israelites?
see evidence of it.
Really?
Yes, we
Okay.
will show that to you. So here we're getting closer to the exit point of the wadi. In the distance is the beach, and past that we can see in the distance now the water of the Gulf of Aqaba.
Now, there's something on that beach modern, is there not? There's some buildings there.
There is, and we'll see that, yes. So there's the wadi we traveled through. We're now at the beach at Nueva. And then there's Nueva jutting out into the water, 5 miles long, 3 miles across. So it's large enough to hold 3 million people.
That is larger than one imagines seeing the photos from
Yes.
the aerial view.
In the background there is the Wadi Watur we came out of,
Okay.
emptied out onto the beach here. This is from our hotel. And you can see the Wadi Watur right there.
So this is what, minus the buildings, of course, this is what the Israelites saw.
Yes,
When they looked back and saw the
yeah.
Egyptians coming.
Some have called this Piharoth, mouth of the hole or canyon, which is, it's a major point to make note of because you're exiting the mountains. So that may be Piharoth. And then here is sunrise the next morning. You can see the beautiful mountains over there in Saudi Arabia and the sun coming up over the mountains. So very interesting. It's nice to be right there at the Red Sea crossing. And here we're panning across. You can see the mountains of Saudi Arabia.
So that's where they are going, but they have no idea how they're going to get
How
across.
they're
Can
gonna
you
do it.
imagine being on that beach, looking
Yes.
at that, saying, Moses, what have you done? No wonder they thought that we're
Yes,
dead.
right. But of course, Moses had full faith in God, that God would do something. He didn't know exactly what. But so here we are taking a look, heading, that's a viewing to the north. And then we headed out from here. We're going to head over to the pillar that marks the spot there
Ah, okay.
at Nueva. And you can see the poor area of town, the Bedouins living.
Now this is the pillar that has been eroded over time, not the
Yes.
ones that the Saudis found on the other side, which was pretty much intact.
Right, this will be the Egyptian pillar we're heading toward. And it was found lying in the water. Here we can see it in the distance next to the road in the center of the video.
Oh, there it is erected there. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Ron Wyatt showed it to the authorities in 1978. The Israelis were occupying the Sinai Peninsula. He showed it to them. They brought it back from the water's edge and set it up in concrete, which was very nice. So today you can go there and stand beside this pillar.
And that's all thanks to Ron Wyatt.
Yeah,
Essentially.
And Solomon, who erected it to start with.
Of course, yeah.
So, the matching column on the Saudi Arabian side had Hebrew writing on it still when Ron found it in 1984 that said Solomon, Pharaoh, Yahweh, death, Mizraim, which means Egypt, water, Edom. So this was a marker marking the Red Sea crossing spot.
Well, and
this-
someone has made their own markings on it.
Yes, unfortunately, but modern graffiti. But Solomon's seaport, Elath, was 50 miles to the north there at modern-day Eilat. And so Solomon, this was his area. This was his neighborhood. And so 400 years after the fact, he had these columns erected to mark the spot of the Red Sea crossing. He knew full well where this event took place.
So that must have been passed down from family to family.
Yeah, sure.
Yep.
So it's a 16-foot red granite Phoenician-style column. Beautiful.
And there's obviously no writing on there. That's all been washed off now.
The back side of it has been eroded away. It doesn't look this nice, and that's where probably some writing was.
But that's a solid piece of granite. That's not like the
Yes.
Sodom and Gomorrah limestone that we saw. This is
Right.
It's
This is very solid red granite. It's very beautiful. So from here, we can get a look at where this is in relation to the water. It's set back. The water's a couple hundred yards away.
and this is the beach here essentially.
Yeah, this is the crossing area right here where the water actually opened up.
Wow.
Yes, it's amazing to stand here.
Now, is there a definite place on the other side that we can match up as to where
Yes.
from the beach?
The column that was cut down in Saudi Arabia, the base of it is still there.
Oh, okay.
So if you line these up, it's 13 miles across the water. Yes. So we're traveling through the local Bedouin village here. But up to the north, before we head down to the crossing site, up to the north is Migdal, or fortress, that is at the narrowest point where the water and mountains come together, is this fortress. I imagine it was designed to limit the travelers going up and down through the beach there, heading north or south. Probably Migdal. And now we're getting ready to head back south to the actual crossing site. And here you can see the beach where the water's opened up. We're standing at the exact spot.
Wow.
Yes, and the mountains of Saudi Arabia in the distance.
Did your knees get weak sitting there? Was it an awesome thing
It was
to behold?
quite incredible, yes, to be there. And so in the foreground, right in front of us here, is a melted beach where the sand and the stones were literally melted together like concrete.
Really?
This is not loose sand. This is a melted beach which the pillar of fire created when it stood here. So,
Separating the Egyptian army from
Yeah.
the fleeing Israelites.
yeah. So again, this is more evidence, that confirms the location
My
here.
goodness. Now, how did you find out about that?
I had heard about it, and then I saw it myself you know. So here it is. You see this rock is just infused in with the sand and the little rocks there. And this is all hardened. This is like concrete.
That is amazing.
Jason here is stepping on it. It's very solid. This is a different area.
How did the locals explain this?
I asked the hotel owner was here with us that we know, and he says, I've never seen this before. You know, he said his hotel's in a different area, but you know, he was amazed at what he saw. So,
well, there's the evidence right there. It's solid.
Right. And so a piece of it was broken off for us to look at, and you can see up close here, all the little rocks and the sand, they're melted together, infused by the pillar of fire. And this goes on for some ways. This isn't just one little spot. And so Ron Wyatt went scuba diving out there, and various things have been found in the water. You can see human femur bone that is coral encrusted, which would be something you would expect. And on the left here, we see a normal one. On the right, you see the coral encrusted femur from one of the soldiers. On the top left, you see a human rib cage stuck in the coral.
Now, what about people who say, "Oh, this is table coral"?
It's not, because it has metal in it. And so here's a horse's hoof that's shriveled up when they took it out of the water. It's shriveled up. So again, we have horse parts, human parts.
What are we seeing here? What is this coral?
And so this is coral standing on an axle, and it has a raised center hub with spokes going outwards. Here's another round chariot with a raised center hub and then spokes going out, and it's got a round shape to it. Again, it's covered in coral.
Do some people say that these are just modern shipwrecks?
Some people have said that, but again, this agrees totally with the design of the chariot wheels. With a raised center hub and using metal detectors, there is metal in the center. There are spokes going out. This is a 4-spoke wheel with 3 spokes left. 4-spoke wheels, 6-spoke wheels, and 8-spoke wheels are found here. Of course, using the metal detector, like he's demonstrating here, all of the hubs here contain metal, and that is the design of the Egyptian chariot wheel with the metal center hub. Now here is a gold-plated wheel. There were 600 choice chariots used in the Exodus, we're told, so you would expect to find 1,200 chariot wheels here with gold. And this one is special. It's gold-plated, and 2 or 3 of these were found by Mr. Wyatt. Now we see a more shallow area where the Red Sea crossing took place. It's shallower here compared to the north and compared to the south. It's still deep. It has to be a deep area. It's 2,800 feet deep, but that gives you a 4% grade, which is manageable. Over in Saudi Arabia, you see the remains of the pillar that was found there on the Saudi Arabian side. It was cut down by the Saudi authorities. It had Hebrew writing on it. We don't know where it is. But there in the Saudi waters, Viveka Ponton went scuba diving, and she found this beautiful chariot wheel in the Saudi Arabian waters. So you have chariot parts on the Egyptian side, chariot parts on the Saudi Arabian side. So,
but it's not the crossing site. It couldn't be.
That's what the critics would say. But you know, the evidence is here. It's real. So we rented a boat and went out with a Rove, a remote operated vehicle. Had a 100-foot tether, and so we were going to do some little inspecting ourselves.
This is a submarine camera.
Yes. So here's the camera. It's got 3 propellers, and it's giving us a live feed back up into the boat. Here we're launching it, and then here's an instant replay on board the Rove. The Rove's videoing this, and so we're down in the water.
So where you are is not that deep where you are right here.
Right,
close to
it's
the land.
not that deep, yes. And so you can see some coral parts here.
But again, coral doesn't grow on sand. There
That's
has
true.
to be
It has
something for it to
attach
grow on.
something, yes.
So obviously there has to be something down there.
Yes.
But this area is very remote. I wouldn't imagine that it's, you know, pieces from from modern humans, because why would they be there? There's nothing there.
Yes. So some of these objects here may be from the the Pharaoh's army. We can't tell for sure.
This is fascinating. So we have the video from the Red Sea crossing. Thank you for showing us your trip down there. After the break, we are going to come back and talk about Mount Sinai, what's on the other side of the Red Sea crossing. So we look forward. All right, well, we're going to get into Mount Sinai now. We have another interesting presentation here, Kevin. So tell us about Mount Sinai.
So this is a photo taken in Saudi Arabia looking back across over to Egypt. This would be a sunset photo. You can see the nice palm trees here in the foreground. But some people are probably asking, why are you over in Saudi Arabia? The reason we're in Saudi Arabia, as we can see on the map here, is because the Red Sea crossing that we saw earlier is found at the Nuweiba Beach in the Sinai Peninsula, and it's in the Gulf of Aqaba. And Midian is where Mount Sinai should be. Midian is in Saudi Arabia, near the mountain here, Mount Sinai. All maps that are historically accurate will show Midian over here in this area of Saudi Arabia. Midian is where Moses fled to escape the punishment of killing the Egyptian. And 40 years later, he was at the mountain of God. And
because you will worship me on this mountain.
Yes, he was to bring the children of Israel back to this mountain, the fire incident with the burning bush. So he was in Midian at that point, and he was to bring the people back to that location. So we want to be looking in Saudi Arabia. So,
you know what I find interesting too is even though Ron Wyatt and Michael Rood and others say it's here, they're not the only ones. You have on your website some other quotes from some very knowledgeable and notable people.
Yes.
For example, Dr. Roy Knutson, he's a professor of biblical archaeology, says the visible evidence is quite overwhelming that the location of the true Mount Sinai has been discovered in Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Herschel Shanks, you mentioned Herschel Shanks to me when we were talking before the program. He says Jabal al-Laz is most likely the site for Mount Sinai. And then Dr. Dean McKenzie, who is a professor emeritus at the University of Oregon, says the evidence points to northwest Saudi Arabia as the location of the actual Mount Sinai.
Yeah, so there are, quote, authorities out there that are agreeing, yes, this is the correct mountain. And this is the place where Ron, he crossed the border in 1984 on foot from Jordan into Saudi Arabia, he and his sons, and they walked through the desert. It was a very strenuous hike for them, and that's when he was taken prisoner, supposedly, being accused of being an Israeli spy. But Ron Wyatt found this mountain there, and he asked the locals, and the locals said, Jebel Musa Henna, or the Mountain of Moses is here. And so you've got a local tradition out there that, yes, this is the Mountain of Moses, and of course they do respect Moses, the Muslims do.
Now there's two names there, Jabal al-Laz and Jebel Musa?
Yeah, Jebel Musa Henna. They call
Musa
it the
Henna.
Mountain of Moses.
Okay.
Yeah, is what they call
And we're
it.
talking about the same place?
Yes, same
mountain.
place. Same
Okay.
as Jebel al-Laz, yes. And so here is the beach on the Saudi Arabian side of the crossing site there.
Where the Israelites came over,
Yes.
from Nuweiba.
And that's where we saw in the previous segment where the chariot wheel was found.
Ah, okay.
In these waters here, so this is a continuation of the crossing site. And so from the beach area, you can also see where the column was cut down. The column that had the writing on it, death, Mizraim, Pharaoh, Yahweh, Solomon, water. So this was a column marking the spot for the Red Sea crossing. The authorities cut it down and took it someplace. We don't know where it is.
And what's interesting, there's two columns, and people might say, oh, well, that's just each culture had their own traditions of raising columns for this and that. But these are matching columns. They're the same granite.
Yes, they're from opposite sides of the crossing site, strategically placed, and then you have the chariot parts in these same waters. So they were placed there on purpose, for a reason. Pillars were used, in ancient times to mark places or events. And so, we can trust these columns in this particular case. Solomon's Seaport was just to the north. He knew of this area, what was going on here. So in our next slide here, we can see Tim Mahoney in the foreground, and in the background, you can see the split rock, the first split rock.
Yes, okay.
So we went from the second one back to the first one here. And of course, Tim Mahoney, he is with the website patternsofevidence.com. They're putting together a documentary on this and the Red Sea crossing. But you can see in the distance the split rock on top of a 300-foot tall hill. The split rock is 50 feet in height. It's a very prominent rock. Now in Numbers 20:11, and Moses lifted up his hand, and with his rod he smote the rock twice, and the water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank, and their beasts also. So God provided for them. He gave them provision. And
water for 1 million people.
Yes.
And probably several million
so
animals.
Probably 3 million people, plus their livestock. Here you can see the split rock where you can see a large amount of water erosion. A large amount of water erosion coming down from the rock. In the foreground here, you can see channels being cut into the rock. The water has eroded the rock to a smooth surface here.
And this is the rock that in modern Western times that Jim and Penny Caldwell, I mean, the Bedouin have always known this is here, but this is where Jim and Penny Caldwell discovered this one.
Yes. After Ron discovered the mountain, Jim and Penny went out there and they also found this rock. So very, very large rock. The split in the rock is so large you can actually walk through it. And a large amount of water erosion inside the rock itself. Here you can see how it stands out prominently above the peak there. And so here you can see the split in the rock where a person could walk through it. When God split it, it sure split, and then the water erosion coming up out of there, spewing up, it created more space probably in the rock, eroding it away. And you can see water erosion coming down from the rock.
Yeah, and even if you saw this and you were a skeptic and said, well, that rock has always been split, it's just it's a natural outcropping, and that erosion is wind erosion, well, you're not going to have wind erosion flowing down in a pattern similar to what water would create.
Yes, this is definitely water erosion coming down. Again, this is a desert area, very little rainfall at all out here, and yet all this water erosion you can see on the rocks coming down from this giant split rock. So God did provide water for them lovingly, even though they were impatient and rebellious, kind of like us, I guess.
Aren't we all? Yes.
Yeah. So in our next slide, you can see Ross Patterson. He's standing next to the split there in the rock.
Now, those who are not familiar with Ross Patterson, who is he in relation to all of
He's
this?
a friend of mine in New Zealand who also promotes Ron Wyatt's work.
Oh, very good.
Presentations, and he was able to make it out there. And so our next slide, we can see the altar Jehovah Nissi in the foreground. And in the background, we can see the split rock once again standing up. Very prominent rock in the background. And
so this is an altar of some kind
this mentioned
here.
in the Bible, yes, this altar. So again, this is matching the biblical account once again. And there's also some circular rock formations. I don't know if they held the bottoms of the tents down or something, but you see some round rock formations where the children of Israel were encamped in this area.
That's similar to what we find in North America with the Cherokee Indians and such across the country, that in certain areas where they would camp, there's these circles where their tents were.
Okay, yeah.
At different times of the year, yeah.
Sure, yeah. So over on the other side of the mountain is the front of Mount Sinai, and you can see in the distance the blackened peak of the mountain. Once again, the Bible says that the mountain was a smoke. It was on fire. And so the mountaintop here is blackened. When you walk up to the top of the mountain, several people have, you turn the stone over, the top of it's black, the bottom of it is brown.
Really?
So there's evidence that it was burned on top, and the natural color is on the bottom, and it's brown.
Now that answers a question I was going to ask, and you've already answered it, because I have heard a secondary theory that this is just a different type of rock. It's a black rock that happens to have this line right at a certain point near the peak.
Yeah, but that's not the case. Yeah, this is a burned mountaintop, because underneath it, it is brown material. So it's actually a day hike to make it to the top of the mountain and to make it back down, strenuous walk. But people have been up there and they've seen the blackened, burned.
And that is the tallest mountain in the area.
It is. The upper 2/3 of Saudi Arabia is the tallest of mountains. And that's another clue that ancient historians have said, that it was the tallest of mountains in Midian. And that's what it is.
Here it is from Josephus. We were just looking at that now. Josephus said that Mount Sinai was the highest of mountains in the city of Midian, which is just outside of Al-Bad.
Yes, Al-Bad is 15 miles to the south.
Okay.
And Al-Bad is where Jethro is from. On some maps, you'll see the name Jethro next to Al-Bad. And the caves of Moses are there also at Al-Bad.
And also Philo said that Mount Sinai was located east of the Sinai Peninsula and south of Palestine, which puts it again in this vicinity.
Again, we're in the correct location. So you have all these ancient historians identifying the site, and you have the Bible saying Mount Sinai in Arabia, Galatians 4. So it's pretty incredible. It's been lost for so many millennia, and yet here it is coming out near the end of time for a demonstration of truth for mankind. So Exodus 19, and Mount Sinai was altogether on a smoke, because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and the smoke thereof ascended as the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mount quaked greatly. My friend Aaron Sin was out there around 2003 with Tim Mahoney, and again you can see the blackened peak in the background, and at the base of the mountain, we'll see a little bit later, is the remains of an altar. Once again, fitting the biblical account. You can see a guardhouse on the right edge of this photo. They put a fence around the front of the mountain, and a guardhouse and a sign telling people to stay away. This is an archaeological area. So the Saudi authorities are recognizing this as an archaeological site.
Well, having put that much effort into it, they know.
Yes.
They know darn well what this is.
Sure. And then another photo here from a distance further back from the mountain. You can see, again, the encampment area, and the left side of the photo in the distance, that's an area where Elijah's cave is. And here in the very center of the photo is Elijah's cave. It's in a shadow, but it's in the, kind of the very center of the photo here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you can see it there.
Yeah. And he, Elijah, arose, he did eat and drink, and went in the strength of that meat 40 days and 40 nights unto Horeb, the mount of God, and he came thither unto a cave and lodged there. 1 Kings 19.
Now, how many people would catch on to that this is the same? Because we hear of Elijah's cave, but normally you wouldn't tie the two together. You wouldn't stop at Mount Horeb. Oh, yes, that's right. This is the same place. You know, it's funny that it's just all in the same area.
Everything matches here, you know, the biblical account. And this is taken from inside the cave, and we're looking out into the valley below. This is quite a photograph here.
Wow. Now, that is, there in the photo you can see that's the Saudi government's buildings, is it not?
Well, actually those are Bedouin buildings
Bedouin
out
buildings.
in the far distance. But just in front of that, toward the mountain a little bit, is the fencing they put up, the Saudi authorities, to keep people out.
And there's all kinds of things down there. There's even a modified corral of types.
There is, remains of an altar, remains of pillars at the base of the mountain. You can see Elim. Elim was where there were 12 wells and 70 palm trees, we're told. And if you go there today, there are still 12 wells at this site.
So this is no doubt Elim.
Yes. So this is, again, confirmation we're in the right area. And
it's on the right trail. It's on the way, is it not?
Yes, it is. Right. And so we're back at Mount Sinai again, and Ross Patterson is pointing to a spot in the distance. This is where the golden calf incident took place. We're going to see that shortly. But this will give you an idea of how Moses is coming down the mountain, and he could have seen the dancing and the apostasy taking place. And of course, his anger became hot, righteous indignation against the apostasy of the people. And Exodus 32, and it came to pass as soon as he came nigh unto the camp, that he saw the calf and the dancing, and Moses' anger waxed hot, and he cast the tables out of his hands and brake them beneath the mount. So that's what he saw. And here we can see, this is an aerial view of the large rocks where the golden calf was placed on top of this. The Saudi authorities, they have placed a fence around this once again, and there's a sign saying this is an archaeological area, stay out.
And the clue is that there are paintings on the side that are not indicative of that area, are they?
That's right. You've been there, I guess. Right?
I've seen photographs.
Okay. Yeah. So here we are. This is a closer shot of it. And on the sides of this, as you say, there are inscriptions of the Apis bull and so forth on the side of this from Egypt. So they came from Egypt. They're accustomed to this, Egyptian bull designs and so forth. And here Ross is next to one of them.
And that is not native to that area.
Right,
That's
right.
the key.
The Saudi locals, do not draw this type of Egyptian drawing on the rocks, in their area. So this is something brought over from Egypt, these designs and so forth. So, and then Ross is next to some other carvings here, more bulls and calves, and you see a camel and so forth. So a lot more inscriptions here showing people were here, and again it's tied back to Egypt. So, and here's some more drawings Ross is next to. This is out in the encampment area.
Oh, so this is not at the altar itself. There are more of these.
These are a little bit away from the actual golden calf altar. These right here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then this is Dr. Kim, who was out there, went out there 12 times. He worked for the Saudi prince, and he found numerous drawings out here also. He also found these artifacts, incredible amount of pottery and so forth in the encampment area.
And he was wasn't he a personal physician to the king?
He was to one of the princes, yes.
The princes.
Yes. And then he found, if you can see here, the arrow's pointing to a menorah.
Wow.
He found a inscription of a menorah where it was actually made there, Mount Sinai, the golden candlestick. So this is where it was made, and this is the oldest image ever of the menorah or golden candlestick.
And again,
he found it there.
Even if you were to argue that, what would a Hebrew inscription be doing in the middle of a Muslim Arab country?
Exactly, yeah. This is showing the Jewish roots of these drawings out there and of the people that were there. And then Ron Wyatt found this millstone in the encampment area. Once again, evidence of the people occupying, and this would have been used with manna, grinding up the manna. So this is, a manna stone, so to speak.
Wow,
Pretty
absolutely
incredible.
amazing. Well, you know what, we're going to have to cut it short.